Back to the Compassion Show, where we explore the very messy, the very brave, but also the very beautiful edges of leadership through the lens of compassion. And today, I'm joined by someone whose courage I deeply, deeply admire, Lorenzo Rizzi, who is head of Counterparty Risks at Lloyds Banking Group. But it's not his job title that brings him here today. It's actually his humanity. Lorenzo has quietly and now increasingly more publicly become a voice for vulnerability inside one of the UK's biggest financial institutions. And what began as an honest conversation with his team has grown into a powerful movement of self-compassion, mental health, ownership, and peer connection, reaching hundreds and hundreds of colleagues across the bank. So Lorenzo speaks not from theory, but from lived experience. He's faced emotional burnout, chosen recovery, and continues to show up with radical honesty, demonstrating that leadership isn't about having all the answers, necessarily, but it's about creating space for that truth. So Lorenzo, it's a real honor to have you with us today on the Compassion Show, and thank you for being here. And thank you for being willing to share not just your role, but your soul. So thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you, Nigel. Thank you for having me here in your Compassion Show today. And thank you for the wonderful introduction. I think you summarized very well my story and what I've done in my work environment. Just to give a brief introduction to the listener of my background, I've been working in financial services for 25 years. And back in 2023, I had the burnout at work that resulted in a severe depression event. I've been in a very dark place, as you can imagine, but thankfully, to my family, my friends, my medical professional, and LBG that has been very supportive in this process, I made a successful recovery and went back to work after 6 months in my previous role. What I decided to do when I came back, I decided to talk my team through what has happened. Just because I thought that they deserve transparency. I've been off 6 months. I thought that they should have known what had happened. And as I was talking through my story, I have realized that the team were getting more and more transfixed as I was talking through. A colleague bursting into tears, all the colleagues at the end of the call telling me, "Oh, Lorenzo, thank you very much for sharing your story. It was incredibly impactful. We can all relate to this either directly to our experience or indirectly to the experience of relatives." And it has really surprised me in terms of the impact. And then in hindsight, I realized that the power of my talk was mainly in my vulnerability and my authenticity. And then everything started from there because I had other teams reaching out to me and the word spread a little bit. They asked me, "Oh, Lorenzo, can you do the same talk to our team? We have heard that is good. People are really resonating with that. You're creating, to your point, you're creating space for others to speak up if they have difficulties." And then everything started from zero. But before I knew, I would have talked almost 1,000 colleagues through my story. And what has been really surprised me, what really stuck with me, is the ripple effect that you have. Because if you talk to 10 colleagues and you inspire 10 colleagues and you create space from 10 colleagues, then what is happening? These colleagues will speak with a colleague, will speak with their relatives when they're back home, they will speak with their friends, they will talk about these things. So you have this multiplier, and from 10 people you talk about, you ended up touching and influencing 1,000 people. And I've seen this really happening, day in, day out after my talks, people reaching out privately saying, "Lorenzo, I have this problem with this person or with these relatives. Your talk was really inspired. We took action on the back of that." So you can see really how the power of storytelling is unleashing energy and using this ripple effect that I think is the most sort of surprising things that I've experienced in these sort of talks with my colleagues. So that's in a nutshell what I've been and what has sort of brought me to this, which is so-called leader ally storytelling, when a leader of organization is embracing vulnerability, is authentic, sharing his story, and as part of that, space for others to do the same and take ownership of their challenges.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that there's over 1,000 people in the bank who will be very, grateful for your trust and your honesty and your generosity of sharing those. So can we just go back a bit? Can you just walk us through what were the root causes of this burnout? what was going on beneath the surface, either at work, probably at work, that pushed you to the edge? What was going on? What were the triggers?
Well, yeah, when I have these thoughts with my colleague, the first things that I'm telling them is that burnout is never the result of one cause. You always have different things at play. I've learned it the hard way, but that's always true. So I had a relatively unhealthy work-life balance. No, that's clearly one of the issue that you always have in burnout. I had some external stressor that clearly played a role, right? In life, you always have something, but it's just sort of adding to the burden. And crucially, this is something that people don't really realize. I had some personal traits that just made me more likely to burn out than other people. Yeah, just to name a few: always say yes, never say no, taking care of everybody but yourself, being a perfectionist, and not being compassionate, not being compassionate with yourself. And also, and this is quite interesting, I've never really been like that, but in the 4 or 5 years before the burnout, I sort of drifted to this behavior. I was defining my identity too much in terms of what I was as a professional and not as what I was as a husband, as a brother, as a human being. And this is also a problem because then if something goes bad at work, then everything is magnified. So, these are all sort of common sense things, but when they are ingrained, as it was my case, they're difficult to eradicate, and you really have to confront them and do the self-inside work to take control. So it was a very sort of complex, and as always, there's a burnout, sort of set of variables that push me at the end. And to your point, what really the question, what pushing me on the edge, it's always like that. Is your brain and your body, they're taking a decision on your behalf. Because what happens usually, especially for men, not easy to ask for help, which is one of the key problems. We all very invested in what we are doing. We're not accepting that we need some support. So what you do, you just keep going, pretending that you are strong enough to overcome the further challenge. But in reality, you're sleepwalking into a burnout. And at some point, just your brain and your body, they just pull the plug. And what you have in these cases is what is called psychological decompensation in medical terms. So what you have is that all the symptoms of burnout, they're suddenly magnified by an order of 10, 20, which means that you need urgent medical attention, as it was in my case, because you're literally hitting the wall. And usually when I do my talks, this is also something that I'm keen to land as a first key message, is the importance to ask for help. We're not doing it, especially men. It's difficult, but I would say in mental health challenge space is the most difficult but important things to do.
Yeah.
Because once you get things off your chest, you realize quickly that, we have, there's other people that have the same issue. These people have found solution. Look, actually, there is a way out, because at the end, yes, I have a couple of issues here, but I can overcome them, right? I can look up to people that have already solved the issue. And suddenly, all this weight, all this burden that you have on the shoulders, I'm saying it disappears.
Yeah.
Gets much lighter. So this bit about asking for help makes a huge difference. And we're not doing enough, because there's still stigma surrounding mental health clearly in the society.
Yeah.
Not an easy thing to do, especially for men, but it really makes a difference from you may took the pedal off the gas for 1-2 months, you set priorities, you understand that you have to change a couple of things. So between this and a full-blown burnout, that may take years to solve. So
Yeah.
I'm not stressing enough how much important it is to ask for help. And I've experienced this in my own experience. Really crucial.
Yeah. I mean, I just want to take you back. You talked about having this personality trait that is very common, actually, about in leadership, management, then leadership, which I call the empathy trap. So we're consumed by other people's problems, their issues, and we take those burdens on as our own, and that leads to empathy burnout. I mean, it's catastrophic how much leaders and managers of people have to take on people's personal lives. It happens. It's just natural way we are as human beings. It just happens like that. So I want to draw attention back to that, which is really interesting, which actually leads me on to the next question, because you really described, what was going on and your kind of personality led you towards that. But what were the signs and the consequences of the burnout in your life? How did it affect you mentally? How did it affect you emotionally? How did it affect you professionally?
Yeah, this sort of goes back to the point about being in denial because you're not accepting the fact that you have to ask for help. So, the early symptoms of burnout were very clear to my family, to my wife, but I was just like in denial. So I was dismissing them. And I was saying, look, I've been doing this for 25 years. No. Oh, well, yeah. I think it's you're always amazed how much this experience are common and you have no certain pattern that's always the same. So I was in denial, but I clearly had already the symptoms of burnout. So difficulty in sleeping, bordering insomnia, feeling cut off from other, being exhausted, tired, procrastinating, having cynical view about others, not feeling any more joy in doing things. All these things that were very clear, but my brain was very powerful in dismissing them and just avoiding them. So that's, you can see how I was feeling mentally, emotionally. Then professionally, clearly, I wasn't in a good place either because I was sort of trying to brute force my way through all these challenges. But when you're doing without really tackling the underlying issue, it's a little bit dead end. So the sleepwalking to burnout is, in this case, is unavoidable. And in my case, what I found afterwards through, we'll touch, I guess, on recovery, on the healing process, but clearly the therapy, going through a process whereby you try to know yourself better is key. And through that, I learned something that I knew deep in my soul, but the therapy clearly helped to expose it. At work, I had a fairly, let's say, dysfunctional relationship with authority that created quite a few issues.
I want to go into that, stop you there for a little bit. Can we just drill down into that a little bit? This dysfunctional relationship with authority. What does that really look like? What does that really mean?
Yeah. So I think, sometimes they call it like, imposter syndrome, or there are different things to look at it. But I was basically, feeling not comfortable in dealing with people above me, above a certain level. But why? Why was that? Why? There was no reason, right? I was kind of, I'm a good professional. Clearly, there is authority in the corporates, but there's no reason to be sort of, overly stressed about that. There's no reason to be overly preoccupied about that. Then what I figured out with my therapist that there was clearly a reason, and it was back in my childhood. And what it went back to my relationship, as most of the time it happened, a relationship with my father. So in a nutshell, without going into not too much detail, but my father wasn't really happy that I had sort of not gone to the university because he had a small corner shop. He wanted me to take it over. And so deep inside, he was really regretting my choice to go to university. And all the time I would have come back with my exam, he would have been really very tough, saying, "Oh, Lorenzo, you should have never done university. No, why you're doing that? Useless." And this was impacting me so deeply at the time that this has ingrained in my relationship with authority in the future. So I was always saying the sort of the face of my father in all this, +1, +2, +3. And this was dysfunctional because it was creating anxiety that was not needed, absolutely, right? Some negative thoughts that were completely unnecessary. End of the day was causing a build-up. But this is just like, honestly, just an example to show how important it is to know yourself better. And you have to go back most of the time to your childhood. You have to go back a couple of decades and try to do the heavy lifting and understand, why do I behave like that today? Is there a reason? Can I understand this reason? And once you realize it, it's been painful because it may bring up like memories and things, but it is extremely powerful because then you're in control. The way my business coach during the healing process was used to call it, which I think is a brilliant way to describe it, is that the so-called little Lorenzo was struggling because when I was looking into these people in a little bit like, say, imposter syndrome, is the little Lorenzo that was struggling. So a way to cope with that was like visualizing the old Lorenzo hugging the little Lorenzo.
Oh, wow!
Right? And this is one of the techniques that are used in therapy, so that you're overcoming your fear by having your old version, which is the current version, hugging, metaphorically comforting your child version, and in the process overcoming this fear. And it works very well. It's sort of a usual technique used in psychology. But just to hopefully bring to life how important it is to know yourself better, especially in these cases where there is something in the challenges that you're experiencing that are linked to your personality.
Yeah.
Then clearly, you also have to work on setting boundaries in terms of the work-life balance, clearly, and my employer has been very supportive in sort of redefine these things in a very healthy way. So there's clearly no job to be done there.
Because for me, what I did, because I burnt out when I was in my early 20s, and then again recently I had this kind of issue I had to deal with. I had to face reality that I was really toxic, and I was not only was I toxic to myself, I was toxic to everyone else around me. And for me, I would actually work longer. I kind of put the shield of I'm a workaholic. That became my badge of honor. And I would be waking up at 3:00 in the morning and writing emails to people, and why aren't they up responding to me? What is going on here? And I would drink and I would smoke and I'd do all these things that were just bad for me. But those are my traits, and it's a downward spiral, and to the point where you have to try and figure out, how do I know I'm going burnt out? So when did you realize that you were burning out, and what did recovery look like for you, and what steps did you take, and what kind of support systems did you put in place for yourself and your family and for your role? How did you know you were there?
As I was mentioning before, given that I sleepwalk into burnout, in my situation, I knew it because I just hit the wall. So I had this psychological conversation, and quite suddenly, I was in a quite dark place, much worse than I was the day before. And you are completely depleted, physically, mentally. You just need medical attention. So when you're sleepwalking into burnout, you know very well what is happening. Then this is also linked to the sort of asking for help, and also linked to the stigma, which is usually the second point that I'm trying to land in my talks, because they're connected with asking for help. But we know mental health challenges are still surrounded by stigma, less than in the past. There's a lot of things moving. I've been in a summit here I mentioned to you, Nigel, on Monday. Organized. It was called intersection between finance and mental health, not only in terms of how to create a more sort of healthy workplace, but also trying to bring together the investor and the usually innovative company that are devising new tools. And there's a big movement out there. So things are changing. But now, let's be honest, mental health challenges are still surrounded by a fair amount of stigma. So what this means, and I've experienced that way around on myself, people don't know what to do. If you break your knee, you go to the knee, they put a cast on it. Yes, unfortunate, but you go back to work, you talk about that, you have a laugh with your friends. No, it's unfortunate, but it's in the realm of the possible. When you have a mental health challenge, you are completely displaced. You don't know where to go. You don't know where to ask. You're feeling alone. You're feeling ashamed. And this means that you're not going to get the right professional advice, which is key. Same as if you sprain an ankle, you have to talk with orthopedic, right? And everybody knows it. There's no problem. And then you have to do some physiotherapy on the back of that. So just to bring to life in my example, when you have a severe depression event following a burnout, you need two medical professionals. And I didn't know, because what my wife did clearly, it has been I hit the wall. So everything has been quite hectic. She reached out to a psychologist, and the psychologist straight away mentioned, look, you have to see a psychiatrist first. Why? You have to see these two medical professionals, because the psychiatric is just orthopedic. He is fixing the problem during the acute episode, which means that he's stabilizing yourself. He's making sure that the situation is not getting worse. He's giving whatever they have to give you to make you stable, first up. But this is not solving your issue per se, because most of the time, in a burnout and in severe depression when following it, you have to do this inward-looking journey. How did I get here? And what do I have to do to avoid to get there again? And this is not typically the job of a psychologist.
Yeah.
So these are two legs. If you just go to the psychiatrics, it's going to stabilize you, but it's not really solving the underlying issue.
Yeah.
If you go too early to a psychologist, you cannot really do this work because you have to be stable to do that. So you see how these two legs, and medical professional knows this very well, and it's the first things that are telling you, but I didn't know. I think most of the people don't know. In these cases, need these two professional figures. And if you combine them, it's very powerful. And the first things that the psychiatrist told me, they say, look, Lorenzo, I know it's not easy to accept it, but these will take months. It's not going to take days. But I tell you, their prognosis is very good because we know what it is. It's a severe depression event on the back of the burnout. If you do your homework, if we follow the steps, probability to go back, even to your previous role, as it turned out to be, and I'm now thriving in my role, is very high. But it takes time, and you need somebody telling you, don't rush. It takes time. This is not a quick fix. But I tell you, no, you have highly likelihood to get back to normal and to go back even to the job that you were doing previously, and most likely more successfully because you will know how to do it.
And this takes big support, right, from your employer, from the bank, because, so how did they respond when you came back and you started speaking openly about this? I mean, if it,
this goes back to. Sure. No, this goes back to the point that I was making before. It has been a cliff edge. So also for my line manager, it came as a surprise because suddenly I show up in his office and he clearly saw a certain way that there was an issue, right? At this point, I was already breaking down. So it has come a little bit of a surprise because I didn't give any early signal, which is one of the issues that we have in these cases, right? Because people are sort of going to the limit, then there's a cliff edge, and then you have to react to things. In my case, no, they have been brilliant. They have been very supportive. I have to be very thankful to IBG. Without their support, I wouldn't have had the time to do the healing process properly, which is key. What happens sometimes, people are rushing the healing process. And going back to my point before, if you don't understand the underlying causes, and you go back after 1 month, the relapse is quite likely. So, and unfortunately, I've seen people going back too early, relapsing, going back too early, relapsing. So I have to be really, thankful to my employer. They created a space for me at the time to heal properly, and going through without any rush through the steps that I had to do. So they have been a very caring employer to me.
You don't get that a lot. But that's great, particularly in the financial services industry, right? So congratulations to Lloyds Banking Group. That's brilliant to hear. And so what's changed now? Now you're back and you're talking about it. You're being open, and thank you for sharing your story today. It's been really wonderful. But what's changed in the way that you lead now? How do you stay grounded? Because you was talking about people relapse, going back and relapsing, which is obviously can be catastrophic. So how do you stay grounded? How do you stay in tune with your team now? Obviously, you talk to a lot of people. I think that's probably the big in tune moment that you give them because you're very open and honest about it. But how do you stay grounded then, and that's your leadership style?
Yeah, I think the big upside for me was that around self-compassion. In hindsight, I realized that was most likely the biggest contribution to, let's say, my burnout, to my anxiety at work. And I think sometimes we underestimate how much lack of self-compassion can hurt us. We're way too, and I remember, again, I had three brilliant medical professionals, my business coach, my psychologist, my psychiatrist during the healing process. And I remember the business coach telling me, Lorenzo, tell me, are you so harsh with your kids? Are you so harsh with your
Yes.
friend? Are you so harsh with your wife? Are you
Yeah.
so harsh with your colleague? The answer is no. Is it no? I say, yes, it's no. Why are you so harsh with yourself?
Yeah.
So this bit about diffusing a little bit this lack of self-compassion bomb, that means different things, right?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about it all the time.
No.
I say in my book, The 10 Traits of a Compassionate Leader, self-compassion is at trait number 5. It's in the halfway bit, because the first, 4 traits leading up to self-compassion are about the inner. But unless we take care of our inner self, I mean, really, really pay attention to taking care of it, then we can't really help or serve anyone else. It's just it's a false prophecy. It's a false positive. It's not really working. It's at the surface level. We never get deep. So self-compassion is so critical. I think it's probably the most important trait of whether you're compassionate or non-compassionate, it doesn't really matter. It is the most important trait, but it's the one that gets ignored the most. People just don't pay attention.
Yeah, you're right.
No one's supporting it.
Yeah, and also the big things about self-compassion is that if you're starting to be kind with yourself, you're starting to be compassionate and kind with somebody else as well. And this is unleashing a lot of energy, because usually what we do, we act out our fears, we act out our frustration, we act out our sort of catastrophizing our negative thoughts, right? And this is very bad for a relationship. So if we break this sort of chain of thought and we are compassionate with ourselves, it means that we'll also be very compassionate with some other people, because we understand that we're not the problem, so they're not the problem. We just have to be more kind with ourselves and being more pragmatic in the way we consider things on a daily basis. And in this bit specifically, again, it's common sense, but cognitive behavioral therapy, when you were saying how you stay grounded, has helped me a lot during the healing process. And again, it's a very simple things to do, because at the end, in hindsight, all these things look common sense. They're very difficult to do.
Yeah, of course.
but gotcha. But what CBT does, in a nutshell, is basically putting the light to all your negative thoughts. So every day, especially in my brain before the burnout, my brain was raising with all sorts of negative thoughts. What the CBT does says, look, these negative thoughts are not real. Your mind is racing with all these things, but what the mind does, it basically uses all this cognitive distortion. Now, I'm sort of quoting now from specialists, and not specialists, but I think it's a good way to put it, that are self-blame, catastrophizing. There's a good list of 10 in all books of CBT that you can find easily online. And once you recognize the cognitive distortion, that you're coming up with a rational thinking. We're saying, oh, actually, this was really negative thoughts. Oh, I was thinking that because I was distorting this. And now here we are. That's the rational thought about that. And when you come to this final stage, especially if you're journaling, your anxiety goes from 100 to 10, I tell you, straight away. So this has happened me a lot, and I'm using still today. Yeah, when I sort of start racing with my negative thoughts, I'm sort of journaling, negative thoughts, cognitive distortion, and at the end, what they call in technical terms, the rational thought, and then once you write it down, you're quite relieved. So
everyone journals their book of light. We don't journal enough, and I think it's something that's, especially for children, I think they should start journaling very early on. It should become a habit for them. And there's one thing that I just want to try and have a talk about, because I think I know what's coming in my next question. I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. And it's I always believe the best advice can only come through learnt experience, not through theory. And you have been through some pretty, and you've come through it fabulously well, but you've been through a dark patch, and I went through a dark patch, and I had to look in the mirror of deep reflection, and I had to put some pretty torrid times, but I had to come through it. I mean, so you and I are kindred spirits in this, and so when we met 3 or 4 months ago, we're like, I wish I recorded a podcast when we met in the city of London. It was such a great conversation, and we just met for the first time. It was wonderful. So the best advice it always comes from learned experience. So what advice would you give anybody, managers or leaders who are who are running on empty, who are
Mhm.
burning at the edge of burning out like you did, what advice would you give them?
Mhm.
Because
Yeah.
you said
So.
earlier, particularly men, we're afraid to talk about it. We're afraid to ask
Mhm.
for help that you quite rightly talk about. So what advice would you give someone who is
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
going
So.
to the edge
Yeah.
but afraid to talk
Mhm.
about it?
Yeah. So I think a bit distinguish sort of two cases. So the first one, if you're really struggling and if you're really already close to the place where it was, it's really about asking for help.
Yeah.
And asking for help is just the first step. Get things off your chest with your GP, with your wife, with your friends, with whoever, but get things off the chest, because after that, things will look much, 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 much easier. So but this is for people that are in a situation where they're already struggling, but they feel that they're trapped. They feel no, there's no way out. Actually, there are a lot of ways out. My psychologist always told me, and she told me off because saying, look, Lorenzo, you are catastrophizing right now because, and she put a lie to all my negative thoughts in a sort of a live CBT session in a split
Wow,
second,
yeah.
right? I remember this example saying, Lorenzo, do you think that your kids will love you less if you won't do those things? No, clearly not.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
don't catastrophize there. Do you think that these will change? If you have to change this, no. So asking for help is huge because it really takes a big stone off your shoulder, and it makes a huge difference. So for the people that are struggling, you also have different charity that are offering help, different way to get in touch with people that you just listen. And there's a lot of people that are good listener. You just need somebody, to get these things off to. This is for the people that are struggling. Then there's another lens, which is a lens that we also discussed more in this conference, which is different. So for the leaders, my experience, to your point, lived experience, I know it's difficult. I know it's not to everybody cup of tea, but being vulnerable, to see vulnerability not as a weakness, but as a strength.
100%.
I appreciate. I've never thought about that. 2 years ago, especially in corporate world, and I understand why vulnerability sometimes is, or most of the time, is looked as a weakness. But actually, what happens is that it humanizes leadership. If you are showing some vulnerability and you're authentic you don't have to go big, right? Sharing something, it humanizes leadership. It creates mutual trust. It creates space for others to do the same and to own their mental health challenges. We know how much mental health challenges are hitting the bottom line today. So it's also like a critical things from a company perspective. It set the right tone, shapes good behavior. It's the list goes on and on and on. It's one of those things that are difficult to understand, and I fully get it. But I've just lived through this experience, and the amount of energy, the amount of sort of engagement, the amount of tangible action that I've seen on the back of my talk, and also people sort of changing also sort of the relationship with me, and just like expressing their. I remember I have like still this feedback that is, don't remember like the details, but this colleague saying me, look, Renzo, this is most likely the most important talk I've ever heard in Lloyds. It has created for me, for my family.
It's human.
Yeah, so it's a difficult one, and I appreciate it. It's honestly very difficult to crack, and I think it's a journey, right? These things, we are on a journey. Things are shifting slowly but surely.
Yeah.
I fully get it. Think about vulnerability as a strength and not as a weakness.
It's a superpower. It is such a superpower to tell your story.
Yeah.
And everyone has to do it. But I understand how difficult it is. I just like talking. So I don't mind, telling my story. But I was reminded of this just the other day, and I was talking to a group of people, and someone gave me the opportunity to speak, and did not, can you tell your story about your book and that kind of stuff. But I went into the negative side of my story, and they were like, "It's amazing how you've just spent that moment of that time to be vulnerable." And to me, like it's just second nature. I just talk about it. I just say, this is what I was like, and I was toxic. I was horrible. I was an arsehole, and I affected it, and I did. It was horrendous, and I regret it. But it's human. And, it's much bigger than a strength, vulnerability. It is a superpower because it makes us human. It's the bit that actually, when we go to work, we wear all these hats. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Let's just only wear one bloody hat. And it's the hat of humanity. We're just human beings. That's what it is. So, we got to get particularly the male side of our world, we've got to get you to be vulnerable and just talk about it, because you can be emotionally intelligent, but if you're in a high, but if your emotional resilience is low, that you're in a real problem. You've got to bring up this resilience level to reach your emotional intelligence. And that's, don't bring your emotional intelligence down to meet your low levels of resilience. Grow on your resilience. And that means, the way to do that is to be vulnerable. So we've been talking about, some of these traits that you've been talking about,
Well,
and I just
sorry,
yeah,
Nigel. Sorry, Nigel. The only thing that I wanted to add on this thing is that I would give two sort of further advice. So first is, what one can do is sharing without oversharing. So there's a sound rule, let's say, a sound rule to maintain a culture of vulnerability while maintaining also some healthy boundaries, because they have to be, I remember my psychologist telling me, is to ask yourself if you are creating too much emotional labor for yourself or to the colleague listening in sharing your story. Yeah. That's a quite good rule of thumb, because
good advice.
If you feel that is good, because if you feel that you are creating too much emotional labor, or maybe the story is not right, maybe it's not the right timing, it's not a skill, it's a decision to share something. Yeah. So this is a good rule of thumb. And also start small, because even in sharing a minor episode of vulnerability, you're still signaling that it's okay to share difficulties to the colleague, right? It doesn't have to be big. It just can be something in passing, but it does send a signal. So given that it's so difficult, and it would have been very difficult for me 3 years ago, then the burnout sort of changed this. Given that it's so difficult to start to make the first step, I think this sharing without oversharing and start small. I think that
that's great advice.
That's not.
That's really powerful advice. Because as I said earlier, it's tough to get to make those vulnerable steps. What is the first step in my vulnerability process? And I think starting small, as you say, is wonderful advice. And thank you for sharing that. And I think I'm gonna take that, put it in my toolbox. So listen, we've been talking about your journey. We've been talking about some of your personality traits. That you affected part of your burnout, which were thank you for sharing all of that. And we talked about the signs. We talked about recovery. We talked about the great stuff about how the bank supported you. And a big shout out to Lloyds Banking Group. That's wonderful. Thank you very much. In my book, I have these 10 traits, and I think I know the answer that's coming, because we've kind of stepped on it. But I think I'm going to give you a different answer of what I think is the trait you're displaying. But what out of the 10 traits, what was the trait that was most important to you in your recovery, and what do you think is the most important trait today? And then I'm going to tell you what trait I think you're displaying beautifully. But I think what was the traits there for you?
I mean, I would have to go with number 5 of your book. So it has to be the self-compassion, clearly. But I also think is the 10th, like the defensiveness.
Yes, defensiveness. Oh yes.
Well, yeah. So I mean, when I sort of read like the list in your book, this is also key, because it's sort of linked to the you told me that it's a sequence. It's also linked to to number 5 and all the ones that are coming before. But it's really this letting our ego a little bit behind, and just not being so harsh on ourselves, releasing this pressure that we are creating just ourselves, right? Because there's nothing that's really there's clearly some pressure from society. We're living in a world where everybody's very successful and so on and so forth. We're all very invested in our job, but at least for me, self-compassion, just not being so harsh with myself, which takes different work stream, right? Because one thing is, I'm really enjoying not being any more a perfectionist. I'm still a perfectionist. No, but I say I'm much less perfectionist, right? And I tell you, these are all simple things, but they're helping a lot, because just by being less perfectionist, you're just like setting yourself for less pressure,
Yeah, there's
less
so much
anxiety,
pressure with
right?
being a perfectionist. So much. Why do we
Yeah,
do it? And who are we trying to
yeah,
do it
well,
for? That's the thing. We just, are we trying to satisfy this ego that's full of self-doubt, self-criticism, self-judgment? It is such a crazy one. But here's a trait I
and
think.
well,
Sorry,
yeah,
here's a trait that I think that you display so beautifully, and it's my favorite trait out of all the traits that I talk about. And actually, all the traits come from my favorite book, which is A Course in Miracles, which my traits are based on. It's trait number 6, which is generosity. Fact
mm,
that you give everyone your story in the bank is just incredible. I mean, because you are giving and giving, and I think that probably also, because I call it selfish trait, because what you get back, the more we praise, the more we honor, the help, the more we support, the more we talk to people, the more we help. What do we get back? We get better performance, we get better engagement, we get better, we just, everything's better on the way back. That's why it's a selfish trait, and we should be selfish in our generosity. And that's what you're doing. I think it's absolutely remarkable, because you probably don't really understand the power of your generosity in all those people that listen to your story. It is remarkable, and you have this kind
oh,
of strength of
yeah.
generosity.
No, thank you for that. And the way I sort of know, because it's not the first time that people are saying, "Oh, thank you very much. You're very generous." To the way I sort of now play this back is that actually is a very selfish act. No, what I'm saying is that it gives me a lot back,
Yeah.
because what happens is that when you're doing the storytelling, and there's also a couple of instances where memory comes back, my voice starts to shake a little bit, but by talking through the story, you're digesting it, you're metabolizing more. So there is a level of a process that is helping me a lot. And I don't know, it just happened naturally for me to share the story. So I don't really know. It's not really a big effort to me, right? And I'm happy, very happy, clearly, to go back, because I've been lucky. I've been one of the lucky guys
Yeah.
that made the other way. I've come back in my role. I'm thriving in my role now, thanks to all the support that I got. And I just want to give back, because, to your point, I've seen step after step what is causing this and how risky is certain behavior. And I know, to your point, how storytelling can be so powerful, because in one of this sort of feedback that I got from a colleague, is clearly that the main theme is one: thank you for sharing tips that will surely help people to take proactive steps. Thank you for creating space also for us to then take ownership on our mental health challenge. So you are just creating a lot of space for others to take ownership, with benefits for the colleagues, clearly, for the people, even for the family. I don't know if you told me, or I don't remember, but what is sort of also underestimated, I think, yes, you told me, the fact that if somebody is struggling at work, then what is happening is that he's coming back, he's not performing really well in the family, right? Because you have a negative ripple effect, you don't have the positive ripple. And then this is sort of emanating, and is touching more people, and then more frustration. And so there is we don't think a lot about that, but there's a sort of genuine negative ripple effect of this a little bit sort of epidemic that we have at the moment in mental health across adult young population, and so on and so forth. So thank you very much for the generosity, right? But in my case, it's really just to given that this comes to me quite easy to do it, and I know how much I'm helping people, I'll keep going, and I'm just giving back. So that's
it is, and I've got to applaud you and thank you. Thank you for coming on the Compassion Show, but thank you for being so open and vulnerable. I mean, it's so refreshing, and I'm sure there'll be lots of people who will be listening who don't know you, who don't know men around the world, but probably don't even know Lloyds Banking Group. But your story it's so true, it's so honest. So thank you for being a champion of compassion. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for continuing to help everybody and tell your story. because you have a very powerful voice, and I think we all respect and are very grateful for your generosity in this conversation. So, yeah, so Lorenzo, thank you so much for joining the Compassion Show today. It's been an absolute honor. And I look forward to continuing this journey with you, trying to help people. So thank you very much indeed.
It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Nigel, for having me. And again, thanks a lot for having me.
Right.
Much appreciated.
That's it. Thank you so much, everyone. That's wraps up today's Compassion Show episode. There's a lot more to come in the other shows coming up. So please feel free to reach out. If you even want to be a guest on the Compassion Show, just let me know. Drop me a message, and I'll talk to you very soon. Take care. All the best. Bye-bye.